Yeah, I did some interviews with some people who knew Sonny quite well, both before he became a top flight boxer and after. Guys like Morris Schenker, who owned one of the hotels in Las Vegas, and who was the lawyer to the mob, basically, and helped get Sonny out of jail. Um, and Barney Baker, who knew Sonny, he was a Teamsters guy. Ash Resnick, Davy Pearl. So I got a lot of information from people who are no longer with us, which helped me understand Sonny a little bit more on a personal level. And it was really a labor of love. And I must tell you, when I began writing the book, I was writing a book about Sonny Liston.
Mm.
But in the last year, as I began to peel away the onion and got a lot clearer on who Sonny was and got a lot closer to him, I realized that I had actually written the big book for Sonny Liston,
Mm.
and now I know why.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, man. I mean, it's the book is a very in-depth analyzation of Sonny that no one else has done before. I mean, the stuff you've come out and you've researched and found out that people were just aghast. I mean, especially me personally. I mean, on the Liston fight, where and there was accusations how Sonny threw the first fight, and on your side of it, obviously, the information you found out about Sonny and his arm and what he was going through in the background of it was very interesting. That I heard. You want to go into that?
Yeah, well, a lot of people never really paid. In retrospect, a lot of people haven't studied that fight,
Mm.
and it was so shocking to me. I figured I had to understand what actually took place, and I'm convinced that that fight was not fixed. Uh, Sonny had a number of things going against him, not the least of which was his age. And Sonny was probably, I think he was twice as old as Ali at the time. And I have in my book a lot of anecdotal information that would indicate that he was born perhaps as early as 1917, maybe 1919. But he was a lot older than he said he was. And he admitted that to Don Chargan and some guys in the gym later near the end of his life, and he admitted that to Emil Griffith as well. Um, the things that caused Sonny to be in a position where he would lose that fight, two of which were done by Muhammad Ali, who had managed to convince everybody, almost everybody on the planet, that he didn't deserve to be in the same ring with Sonny. He had looked very bad against Doug Jones and Henry Cooper, guys who were, I mean, I have a lot of respect for anybody who steps into the ring, but these guys were not legitimate heavyweights in size. Um, and it was part of Ali's campaign of psychological warfare to get Sonny off of his game and to not train. And Sonny trained for a 2 or 3 round fight, as almost everybody knows. Plus, Ali humiliated him so badly on so many occasions in front of his neighbors, in front of the world, that Sonny built up a real strong anger towards Ali, and wanted nothing more than really to kill him when he got into the ring with him. So Sonny fought angry. Now, why this is very important is that in a street fight, a guy like Sonny, if he fights angry, he's more formidable. But in the ring, with of Queensberry rules,
Mm.
it's a major disadvantage.
Mm.
And Sonny used to say, "I always fight my fight. I always fight my fight, no matter what the other guy says, no matter if the crowd's for me or against me. I fight my fight." And he could afford to do that because he had that 84-inch reach,
Mm.
and you couldn't hurt the man. So it was just a matter of time before he got to you. The worst thing was about Sonny's predicament approaching that fight. He's had a severely injured left shoulder and was undergoing heat treatments prior to the fight from Barney Felix, who was a physiotherapist. Now, Barney Felix ended up refereeing that fight. He didn't know he was going to referee the fight until the day of the fight, and he was told to keep it quiet. So Sonny was getting heat treatments and ultrasound treatments on his left shoulder. And if there was a perfect storm of things that would cause a fighter to be at anywhere, to be as far away from his best as possible, that's what happened to Sonny Liston in that first fight.
Wow. Wow. I'm here with Boxing Beats around. Boxing Beats, you gonna say to Paul Gallender?
Hi there, Paul. It's very,
Hi, how are you?
yeah, it's very interesting to hear your findings on Sonny. What made you decide to write about Sonny?
Well, like I was telling Errol just before you got in, I always, I always thought that apart from Muhammad Ali, and this was after Sonny died, that I didn't see anybody in the history of the heavyweight division that stood a reasonable chance of beating him. I think Sonny would have been a 3 or 4 to 1 favorite over any man that ever in the heavyweights, if he was at his best. In fact, if he was anywhere near his best, because he had the best left jab, at least as good a left hook as anybody. His right hand, Angelo Dundee said his right uppercut was more powerful than anybody's. And you simply could not hurt the man. And Sonny was a very good boxer, and he didn't take unnecessary chances. So, but after the Ali fight, the second Ali fight, when he took the dive, it was all bets were off. And the narrative about Sonny Liston has been one that's been totally disrespectful of him ever since. And I thought that was a damn shame, because I've always, in my adult life, I've worked for nonprofit groups to help people who are in need, whether they be kids or senior citizens or the environment. I've managed political campaigns of people who I thought would have done a good job. So this was really consistent with how I was raised. And the biggest surprise to me is that nobody else wrote a book favorable to Sonny Liston when there were a lot of good things that you could say about the man. And I mean, I like I said, I took 35 years to write this book, and there were some biographies of Sonny that were written, but all of them were really dismissive of his talent, and I think contemptuous of him as a human being. And I have the utmost respect for him, even though I know he wasn't a saint. He did some crummy things. But if he had been given a second chance, he would have done really well.
Do you mind me just asking, like, the FBI have recently said that the first Ali and Liston fight was a little suspicious. I'm not sure if they're saying it was definitely fixed. What's your take on that?
That's crap. It's totally bogus. And I've read a number of stories about that. And it's amazing how one 48-year-old FBI memo can cause this mini earthquake in the sports world. It's unfair to Sonny. It's unfair to Ash Resnick, because I'm not sure that any of those guys who wrote those articles even recently took a look at the fight. Because I think if you want to know what happened in that fight and why it wasn't a fix, the first thing you got to do is watch the fight. And Sonny did not fight like a guy who was throwing the fight. And then with all of the reasons that I just previously listed as to what Sonny had going against him, there is to take the word of one low-level gambler.
Beats, I'm getting some feedback, Beats. You have to mute yourself, please, yeah?
Yeah, sorry. My mouse dropped. Sorry about that, man.
Go ahead, Paul. Sorry, go ahead, Pete. Go ahead.
Yeah, to take the as credible information, the assertion of a low-level gambler who claimed he was close to Ash Resnick as proof that that fight was fixed is absolutely ludicrous. I mean, like I say, you look at the fight, you consider all the other information. I mean, in that article, it said that both Sonny Liston and Ash Resnick won $1 million betting. Well, even at 7-1, Sonny would have had to put up $143,000. I'm quite certain Sonny did not have $143,000 at the time of that fight. Plus, there was very little betting going on. There were some places you couldn't actually put a bet down because nobody wanted to bet on Cassius Clay. So if there had been that kind of money that would have been dumped into it close to the fight, that would have turned up in the investigations afterwards. And the odds in some areas may have come down to 4 or 5-1, but the Florida State's Attorney's Office, who investigated the fight afterwards because they weren't satisfied with the outcome, found no indication in the betting patterns anywhere in the country that they had changed. So I've just written an article refuting that, and hopefully it'll get nearly as much play as this article that got from the Washington Times. And you know, I've tried to call the guy from the Washington Times and somebody in the Las Vegas Review Journal who wrote another article based on that, and they won't call me back. They don't care. You know, like I said, the narrative has been set in stone about Sonny Liston, that he was just a bad guy. He was a bad you-know-what that got coming to him, which was said on more than one occasion. And as far as I'm concerned right now, I'm Sonny's manager. I'm the manager he always wanted, needed, and deserved, but never, ever had. And you say, well, you know, you might ask, what does he need a manager for? Well, his legacy needs a manager. And his legacy cannot stay the way it is, as far as I look at it.
I agree. I agree. I know your position on him is one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Where do you rank him in terms of, let's say, a top 5 or whatever?
I rate him no worse than 2.
Really? It's high. Who you have number 1?
Well, I have to put Ali first.
Okay.
By the way, my screen is screwed up. You can still see me?
No, it's fine. We've got the audio. It's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I can't say that Ali was a better that Sonny Liston was a better fighter than Muhammad Ali based on the 2 outcomes. I can't. You know, there's nothing I can do about those 2 fights except to explain what happened to cause those results. But I do think that I can make a very good case that Sonny Liston was far more talented than Muhammad Ali. Because, you know, Ali, he was probably the smartest fighter ever within the 4 ring posts, as his friend Gene Kilroy said, and I agree with that. And he had the greatest hand speed and foot speed of any fighter ever. But he wasn't that great of a defensive fighter. He got away with a lot of stuff, but Sonny had Sonny could control his fights with his left hand, and he had that 84-inch reach, and you couldn't hurt the man. Ali had a good chin, but that means that he had a good chin, so he would get up if you hit him, and he did on the couple of occasions when he was on the 3 occasions when he was knocked down. But you couldn't hurt Sonny for most of his life and his career. You absolutely could not hurt the man. So I rate Sonny number 2. I rate Ali and Liston number 1 and 2, and I think there's a big drop off after that.
Okay, all right. Let me go back to the Cleveland Williams fight, because when I was watching the fight, especially the first one as well, the Cleveland Williams fight was brutal. I mean, you know what I mean? I was watching it, and I was thinking if Cleveland Williams never fought Sonny Liston, he'd have been a world champion, because I don't see how Floyd Patterson or any champion at that point could have dealt with him. You know, what's your take on that? The 2 fights of the Cleveland Williams.
Those are a good barometer to see what kind of fighter Sonny Liston was, because Cleve hit almost as hard as Sonny. Like Sonny used to say, he hit hard, he hit fast, or he punched hard, he punched fast, and he hit Sonny with a lot of punches, a lot of effective punches in the first round of their first fight.
Yeah,
and my favorite round of all time is the second round of their second fight. The first fight lasted 3 rounds, and then the second fight lasted 2 rounds. But you can see that Cleveland Williams lands some really crushing blows to Sonny's head, one after the other. There are 8 or 10 punches, and Sonny finally shakes it off and says, I'm not going to take much more of this. And then he went after Cleve. Now, Cleve, once you hurt him, that was the end of the fight. So, yeah, if Cleveland Williams hit you first, apart from Sonny Liston, he would have probably beat anybody that he fought, because it would have been hard to recover from that. Floyd Patterson would have been overmatched. Could he have hurt Floyd? Could Floyd Patterson have hurt Cleveland Williams? I believe so. Bob Satterfield, who was a hard-hitting light heavyweight, a small heavyweight, he hurt Cleveland Williams and knocked him out. So anybody can be hurt. But yeah, you take a look at those 2 fights and the punishment that Sonny absorbed, and then 5 years later, are you telling me that is anybody going to tell me that Sonny Liston was hurt by a 6-inch punch from an off-balance Muhammad Ali, who was not a big puncher anyway? And that's ludicrous.
Oh, let's go. Yeah, okay. Let me Beats. Go ahead, Beats.
So are you saying that the Phantom Punch couldn't have hurt Liston? So you're saying that the fight was doctored? I'm not going to say fixed.
Well, Sonny threw the fight. And a lot of people think now, oh no, it was a legitimate knockdown. But two things. Back then, Ali, when Liston went down, he's standing over him screaming, "Get up, you yellow bum! Nobody will believe this." That's in that iconic photo of Neil Leifer. He looks so ferocious, and it's because he thinks Sonny's making a fool out of him. He is mad. And then he walks back to his corner, and the first thing he says to his cornerman is, "He laid down." So Ali knew it was a fix. Everybody in the arena knew it was a fix. And after that, nobody wanted anything to do with Sonny Liston. What I have learned, and quite just matter-of-factly and very fortunately, because I never thought I would find out the reason why Sonny took that dive, but on the day of the fight, Nation of Islam members loyal to Ali, but without Ali's knowledge, because he would have never signed off on something like this, they held his wife and son, one of the sons that he fathered out of wedlock, against their will, and got to Sonny and said, "Look, if you want to see them again alive, you're going to have to throw this fight." And so I don't think Sonny did anything different than the two of you guys or me or any athlete in any sport or any person would not have done if faced with that same set of terrible circumstances.
Okay. But here's what I don't understand. If that fight was fixed, number one, why did he get back up? Why did Nat Flesher get on the ring apron and have to stop the fight? It wasn't Jersey Joe Walcott who was going to stop the fight. It was Nat Flesher, the editor from Ring Magazine. Why didn't he just stay down for the 10 count?
Well, he did. He stayed down for a long time. He was down. I've never counted it, but he was down for well over 10 seconds. But
no,
the thing you have
the fight carried on. So if it was 10 seconds, the fight would have been stopped.
Well, except the fight can't end unless the referee counts the fallen fighter out. And Jersey Joe Walcott, he was a celebrity referee. He had refereed more wrestling matches than boxing matches. And he never started a count. He didn't know what the hell to do. Well, the first thing you do is you get the guy who scored the knockdown to a neutral corner.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But the thing is, right. Liston kept fighting, and it was Nat Flesher who stopped the fight. So was Nat Flesher in on the fix?
The fight was stopped illegally. The only guy who can stop the fight is the referee. Yeah. The only guy who can count out a fighter is the referee. And Jersey Joe Walcott did not do his job. It was embarrassing. I don't think he ever refereed a big fight after that. Nat Fleischer was so incensed by what he saw that he screamed at Walcott to come over to him. Now, what Walcott did is he left the two fighters. You never leave the two fighters. Mm-hmm. And then Sonny got up, and you say he started fighting again. Well, technically he didn't. All he did was protect himself. He didn't. The fight was over as far as Sonny was concerned. I mean, it was a pathetic. I mean, I feel so bad for Sonny looking at him when Ali starts throwing punches, and they weren't the hardest punches in the world. But it was all a phony. Yeah, the fight had people not hated Liston so much, the powers that be, and had Sonny wanted to, he would have had a very good case that fight should not have counted, because the result of that fight should not have counted, because he was not counted out. So it was just stopped. And you're right, it was stopped by Nat Fleischer, who had no business stopping the fight, but he thought, here, I'm the grand old man of boxing. Jersey Joe Walcott doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's totally incompetent. And he says to Walcott, the bum is out. The count has reached 10. The bum is out. The fight is over. Okay.
So does Muhammad Ali have any liability in this alleged fix?
No. Oh, no. He didn't know. He did not know. He was, in fact, there's a quote, I think it was in Mark Cram's book of Ghosts of Manila, where Ali says about both of the fights against Liston, he says that those fights were big and Sonny Liston made them small. Well, the first fight, Ali, Cassius Clay made that fight small also. But Sonny did not throw the first fight. He threw the second fight. There is no question that he threw the second fight. And when I hear people now like Thomas Hauser, the great Ali historian, say that, oh yeah, Sonny, yeah, no, Sonny probably figured, yeah, he got hurt, he got knocked down, he probably figured I can't beat this guy, I'll just stay down. It's like rewriting history. And some people may accuse me of rewriting history, but all I'm trying to do is respect it.
Obviously, what's been happening as well about the fights as well, with the FBI coming out with saying that he threw the fights and stuff like that. It's been very touchy subject. Obviously, people feel like it's taken away from Ali's shine at the time, but it's this very, very, very sensitive subject. Obviously, you know what? Let me go. Let me try and stay with this one. So recently, obviously, with you and Al Burstein, I heard you've got some new evidence on Sonny Liston. You said it with the medium or something like that. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know with Al Bernstein and the co-host, I don't think they went into it. I'd like to a nice. You explain it from the start and how you came across it and what's happened since. Go ahead.
Okay. This is going to. I think this will be a huge story in the next couple of months. And as a little bit of background here, I finished my book and submitted it to my publisher, and I self-published my book because I wasn't going to give any of it away, especially for nothing. And there were a couple of publishers that were interested, but they didn't know anything about Sonny Liston. And it would have been on the shelves for 30 days. Then it would have been taken off, and they would have had all the rights. So I decided at some point, and probably when it comes to the 50th anniversary of the first Liston Ali fight, and maybe the second Liston Ali fight, that's when Sonny Liston's name is going to be out there, much more closely attached with Muhammad Ali. So I submitted my book in late January of 2012, and in mid-February of 2012, I connected with a woman on a dating site. I was in Chicago at the time. She was in Denver. And for some reason, her guides were telling her to go further out in her search. And she saw a picture of me on one of the dating sites with a dog, because I love dogs. She loves dogs. And she sent me an email, and I said, well, call me if you want. And there was a real strong connection between Josie Rose and myself. And Josie is a medium and a Jewish mystic. And it's not what she does, it's who she is. There are a lot of mediums like John Edward and Rebecca Rosen, and anybody who goes to them for information from people who have passed will tell you that, in fact, there is an afterlife. There is life after life, because the things that they were told, the medium could not possibly have known, and very often nobody else other than that person knows that. So we talked for quite a while, and it was just amazing how connected we were. So I flew to Denver after about 3.5 weeks. And it was like we were family, Josie and I. It was like we were brother and sister. It's like we had known each other for a long time. And on the evening of March 10th, 2012, we're sitting around, and all of a sudden Josie says to me that Sonny Liston just introduced himself to her by name, and he had placed his right hand on her right hand, and it was a huge right hand. She remembered it. I started transcribing. By this point, I had never believed in anything like this. I have never been religious. I thought that when you're born, a light switch goes on. When you die, a light switch goes off. That I thought that everything that happened to anyone is arbitrary and random. And I hadn't believed in God or reincarnation or an afterlife. It just didn't make any sense to me. I had no desire to research the subjects, because I figured I'm here. I don't know why I'm here. I'm just going to try and live as good a life as I can. I don't need the 10 Commandments to tell me what's good and what's bad. I'm not a perfect person. I never will be, but I do have a code of ethics and I do have values and I do the best that I can. Well, on that first night, I start transcribing, and Sonny Liston spirit, the man that we knew as Charles Sonny Liston, told her at least 7 things about his life, very almost esoteric things that I could verify the authenticity of, like the name of one of his sons, the only one of Sonny's children that I actually spoke to, a guy by the name of William Wingate. And I had asked Bill what his mother's name was. I had interviewed him several months earlier, and he told me his mother's name was Dolores. And Josie had mentioned the names William and Dolores. So I told her, yes, this is Sonny's son and the name of his mother. He talked about how the mob, how he wasn't smart enough to outsmart the mob, and that there were a couple of guys by the name of Frank, and that when you lie down with pigs, you end up smelling like them, and they regretted associating with them. And the 2 guys who ran boxing for the mob at the championship levels in the 40s and the 50s were Frankie Carbo and Frank Blinky Palermo. Now, Josie had not even heard of Sonny Liston when we started talking 24 days earlier. It was 24 days earlier. So beginning on March 10th, 2012, until the present time, I have about 70 pieces of information that Sonny has told Josie that she has channeled, however you want to call it, because I'm still unfamiliar with the process, but whatever those communications and however they take place, and Josie could do a much better job of explaining it than I could, because this is a world of which I am not familiar. These are not stretches by any means. These are 70 pieces of information about Sonny's life and about names and places and thoughts that he had that I can verify as being, yes, this was Sonny Liston, and I can verify it based on 35 years of researching his life. All I did to put myself in a position to be in this position was to write a book. And once I wrote the book, then Sonny brought Josie and I together. Things I didn't talk about in that interview, because I knew it was a shock to Al Bernstein, but I was giving him a scoop. And so I just wanted to get it out there, is that Sonny has told Josie that Josie and I have been together in prior lifetimes as brother and sister. He's told us where. We knew of Sonny, and Sonny knew of us in those lifetimes. Now, as preposterous as this may sound, and I know it sounds, whoa.
Yeah, I know. I mean, everyone's gonna listen to it. They're gonna say, but you know what? It doesn't matter. But I mean, this is it. Like, I'm glad you're actually putting this out there, because end of the day, people, they're gonna have their opinions on it. But like you said, in a couple of days or whatever, or weeks, whatever, this is gonna be a big thing. But I'm glad. It doesn't matter. Like, as far as I'm concerned, if that's what happened, and that's you like you said, your position on it is fine. You continue. You go ahead. Continue.
Oh, yeah. And so Josie, Sonny is collaborating with Josie. It's the way I would term it, on 2 books. The first of which will be out probably in April, called Healing in the Afterlife. Mm-hmm. And it's not, Sonny talked about his life in different ways than he did when he was here. But he's also talked about the other side. He's given Josie 1,600 words on what the experience was when he died, when he passed from this life into the spirit world. 1,600 words. It is fascinating. And there's a second book, and this I am going to be so interested in, for somebody who wants to know as much about Sonny Liston as I can. Mm-hmm. The second book will probably be out probably in early summer. Sonny is taking my biography and rewriting it as a posthumous autobiography. he's having a conversation with the reader.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right.
And and in the vernacular, in the way he used to talk.
Oh, oh, yeah, yeah. So he's basically his language, how he speaks, right?
Yeah, and it's broken language and whatever. And basically, I never met Sonny. I saw him train one time, and the only time I've heard his voice is on interviews, and most of the time he's trying to speak as well as he can. And then in the quotes that I can verify from other sources, you get a glimpse of how he talked. And it was, he was not nearly as articulate as Archie Moore. Let me say that.
Okay, all right. So have you got any, like, with that, like what things can you reveal that he said that about the situation about his death? Does he reveal how he was killed? Because that's I'd like to know that. I'd like to know.
Well,
there's a lot of rumors about that. He took drugs, and so loads of speculation about
that. Everybody, it seems, that's the thing that the casual boxing fan, I'm not calling you a casual boxing fan, by the way, that most people want to know about Sonny Liston. In fact, when Al Bernstein, I was talking with Al Bernstein, he said he wanted to write a book about Sonny Liston in the mid '80s, and he wanted to try and figure out how Sonny had died. And some people said to him, "Why don't you just forget this idea?" So Sonny has not revealed to Josie the circumstances under which he died. And I think he does it purposefully, because if he were murdered, even if all of the people involved in that are no longer around, and that was the end of 1970, so that was more than 43 years ago, what Sonny has says is it doesn't matter. And Sonny said nothing really matters about what took place in this previous lifetime. He admires me for taking a stand and for writing the book that I did. And he said you had to write that book before I could come into the picture and talk about what I really want to talk about.
What does he really want to talk about? Does he want to talk about the life after?
Yes, he does. He wants to give people an idea of what to expect, how to prepare for it, I have a binder full of transcriptions of every time Sonny has talked to Josie, and it's just absolutely remarkable. He talks about what's going to happen, a lot of things that are about to happen to this planet. And he does say the planet is going to survive, but there's going to be major upheavals about things. And like I told Al Bernstein when we were discussing the second Ali fight in Lewiston, that I was 99% certain that my take on what happened and the research that I had done with the kidnap story, that I was 99% certain that that was correct. I will tell you, EJ, that I am 100% certain that the person that Josie Rose is channeling is Sonny Liston, based on all of my verifications. And like I said, I never even thought about this stuff. Now I just routinely ask people if they believe in an afterlife. And I think an awful lot of people do believe in an afterlife, and some people tell me that they want to believe in an afterlife. So there's going to be a lot of skeptics, but I mean, let's face it, a lot of people for many, many years thought the world was flat. Yeah, and it may come to pass that when Josie and I are being interviewed, and Josie is really the important person in this process. Yeah. All I am is the verifier. I wrote a book. I can verify 70 pieces of information. When Josie and I are being interviewed, or when Josie is being interviewed, it might very well be that Josie will tell that interviewer something convey a message from somebody who has passed that interviewer will know is accurate information. Because not all mediums, although several do, have an ability to name names. They can give a description of somebody or But Josie names names, and she absolutely blows her clients away. I mean, it's such a shock to a first-time client, and they say, "How did you know that? How could you possibly know that? You cannot possibly know that information." And like I say, it's not what Josie does. Mediums, that's who they are. They have that ability to, to go back and forth, to glimpse into the spirit world. And I'm convinced there is one. On the other hand, EJ, I've been involved in this now in 2 years. Have I changed at all? Have I changed the way I live my life at all? No, because I've always thought that I've lived a good life. I mean, I haven't been perfect. I haven't done anything really, really bad. I've done things that I regret, and generally I don't do things more than twice before I change my behavior. So I'm just I can't tell you how amazing it is to be part of a process like this. And again, I'm not taking any props for this. All I did was write a book. All I did was write a book, and that set the stage for Josie and I to come together and to meet each other. As it turns out, like I said in the interview, Josie was in Denver for the last 25 years, 26 years. And I've been in California since late 1975. With the exception of 9 months in Chicago, and I spent a few months working with Josie in Denver. We're both from Chicago. As it turns out, we went to the same high school 2 years apart. When I was a junior, she was a freshman. I didn't know her. I mean, it's really, apart from the really importance of what's happening here, I just look at this as a very good story. If I wasn't involved in it, I go, wow, this is pretty. I would say, wow, this is pretty cool. I wonder if it's true, and I'll tell you, it is true.
Yeah. Beats, have you a question for Paul?
So, is this an autobiographical account of Sonny Liston's life? What you're doing?
I didn't do the autobiographical account. In Josie's upcoming book, it will be somewhat. Anything Sonny says will be autobiographical in nature because it's coming from him. And then when he rewrites my book, and I'll tell you, Josie has never read my book. And when we first met, I didn't even have a book to show her. But she didn't. She had never had any interest in boxing. And I had thought, I wasn't sure how much information she had. So I had the idea. I said to her, I'll tell you what, why don't I just look at my book, take out a lot of the stuff that is strictly boxing, that people who are more involved in spirituality rather than sports would not be the slightest bit interested in, and then rewrite it or reformat it in the first person, so that instead of me doing a biography, Sonny is talking about it. And that's what I did. I had about 247 pages. I took out more than half.
So you're basically revisiting your book?
Yeah. But not because I thought Sonny was going to rewrite it. I just thought, well, okay, maybe for people who see this, maybe they want to know a little bit more about Sonny's life. And rather than get my book, we can give that a condensed version of it to them so they can at least see how he was treated and the people that were important to him and this, that, and the other. Because for the first time, Josie started reading my book. And she read a page and a half, and she calls me laughing. And she says, Sonny doesn't talk like this. I said, yeah, I don't know how Sonny talks. I don't speak poor, semi-literate black man. I don't know, and I haven't been around people. I don't know how to do that. All I did was just kind of try. I wanted to give people an idea of what Sonny, what was important to him. And then that's when he just directed her, and she starts writing. She starts adding stuff. And he added like more than, in the first page and a half, he turned it into like 3.5 or 4 pages. And the other thing to remember here is when Josie does this, she's not even conscious. She's not reading. She's taking instruction. So that will be an autobiography. And like I say, people can believe what they want about it, but I'm telling you, this is true. And a lot of people said, look, Paul, you're going to lose all your credibility.
Yeah, that's what people are thinking, isn't it?
Yeah. You know all this about Sonny Liston, and now you're going to say, oh, there's an afterlife, and Sonny is communicating. But it's the very same thing, because here's my book, and I'm drawing from things on my book to verify that this is true. And frankly, I don't care. This is what Sonny's messages are a lot more important than me writing a book or than me having credibility. So it's just once people hear Josie talk, we don't lie. We do not lie. We are honest people, and so people are going to believe what they want. But I know there's going to be a lot of people that are interested in this, and there's going to be probably a lot of people are going to come out of the woodwork and say, "I know Sonny said that." People who knew Sonny. So we'll see.
Okay. Go ahead, Beats.
No, it's just an unusual way to gather information from a medium. How credible is that in the literary world, or is it a usual occurrence? I wouldn't know.
Well, no, there are a lot of books about the afterlife and about the spirit world that people have written. There's a lot of books out there. There have been a lot of movies about them. But keep in mind, my book was already done. Nothing that Sonny told Josie Rose, is in my biography of him. This is entirely separate. In fact, I was writing a screenplay about Sonny, and I took pains to not take any information whatsoever, because I was writing a screenplay about Lewiston, Maine, and I don't write I need to learn a lot about writing screenplays, but I didn't include anything from her stuff. I kept that separate. So how credible is it? Well, it's credible because what I'm saying and what this is going to be billed at is verifiable proof of the afterlife, and I'm the verifier. And people are going to on the interview. This is the most amazing thing, and it was the most personal thing about what Sonny, and Sonny's given me a lot of advice and information and things, and he knows stuff about me. But he twice mentioned the number 7 to Josie and told her to tell me about the number 7. Once in March, it was on March 19th, 2012. Then on May 3rd, I think it was May 3rd, 2012, he told Josie, tell Paul about Lucky 7 and tell him it's okay to tell John about this. All right. The next day, I'm saying goodbye to my cousin John Sorkin, lives in the suburbs of Chicago. And we're very close. He's 17 years younger than I am, but we've always been very, very close. And so he's walking me out to my car. I said goodbye to his family. I was on the say goodbye tour to everybody. But at this particular moment, I was at John's house. I walk out. He walks me out to my car, and we're standing there just saying our goodbyes. And there's a very threatening sky, which I remember from when I lived in Chicago. It was odd. It was like an iridescent green. I don't know if iridescent is right, but it's a strikingly looking landscape. And John is just about getting ready to get in my car. He looks up at a cloud directly above us. And he says, Paul, look at that cloud. There's a perfectly formed number 7. And I looked up, and it was a perfectly formed number 7. At that moment, I've never felt more one with the universe, and than I did at that moment. And people, if people want to say I'm making this up and that Josie's making this up, well, they're free to do that. But this is really happening, and evidently, this lifetime is, it's important. I guess all lifetimes are important, but like Sonny talks about, what we've learned in this lifetime is like less than 0.1% of what there is to know. I believe that's one of his pieces of information. So, I don't know if I can say any more on the subject because I don't want to sound defensive about it. I'm just trying.
No. You know what? No. Because you know what it is. I'll be honest with you. When I heard it, I was just like, wow. I knew. What I felt at the time. I'm not gonna. I can't perceive what Al Bernstein and his colleague was thinking, but I don't think they wanted to go too far on it. But to me, right. I'll go as far as you can on it just to get it out there because to me, it was very interesting stuff because you're a very credible author. You've written a book, spent 30 years, 35 years plus, on this book, and you wouldn't just come out and put this stuff out there if you didn't think. And another question I'll ask you about. So with the afterlife, Sonny, wherever he is, would you say it was in heaven or hell, or where? Obviously, you don't see like he's in hell, but is there heaven and hell? I mean, I know I'm asking. It's a weird question because it's supposed to be obviously on a boxing on Sonny Liston, but is that question ever arisen or?
Well, there doesn't appear to be a hell. There appears to be a spirit world, and I think it would be closer to heaven, but evidently everybody ends up there. The difference is that whatever you do in a particular lifetime, and I always thought this, which was to me why I always considered consequences, is that whatever you do or say, good and particularly bad, you own it. You can't take it back. You can try and make amends, but you own it. And if you do some truly reprehensible things, you have to own up to those things in the afterlife. Now, I don't know that Sonny has specifically, he's talked a little bit about that, but so you carry all of that stuff with you. You carry all of your lifetimes with you, and you learn from them. But no, Sonny hasn't really talked about heaven and hell. He's talked about just where it is. It's just if I had his notes in front of me, I internalize facts and numbers and places a lot better than I do concepts of which I had never been familiar. So, we are accountable for everything that we do.
Okay.
But everybody is capable of a healing, where they can get past what it is they've done and hopefully learn from it.
Okay. Beats, go ahead.
Who is this man of the cloth who's quite pivotal in getting Sonny into boxing and trying to turn his life around? Who was that man?
Well, there were a couple. Father Alois Stevens was the first such person. He was in Jefferson City Prison. He was the prison athletic director, and Sonny had a great relationship with him. And when he saw, that Sonny would sometimes fight, he said, if you're going to fight, why don't you fight in the ring? And that's where Sonny got back into boxing. I think he fought back in 1934 under the name of Charles Sailor Liston, because there's an article in the East St. Louis Journal where they have this picture of a Charles Sailor Liston wearing a peacoat. And he's a very young kid. It said 17. He could have been 14 or 15 because Sonny was a big kid. At the age of 12, he was probably almost fully grown. But the picture in that newspaper was Sonny Liston, and that was in a Wells Twombly wrote an article about that in the 70s, which is how I first found out about it. So he was always a good friend of his. Father Edward Murphy in Denver was a good friend of Sonny's, and helped Sonny said, really turn his life around. When Sonny was suspended all over the country for a couple of really meaningless things, like he was talking to somebody on the street, and a black cop came along and said, "You move on." He said, "What do you mean move on? We're talking boxing here." The guy asked me some questions. He said, "Well, yeah, you're gonna have to move on." He said, "Well, look, if I can't talk on the street here, I might as well be in Alabama." And the guy arrested him for corner lounging. Yeah, and did Sonny handle it well? Well, he did. He didn't let him be pushed around. Sonny didn't do anything wrong. And Sonny would always invite those two priests and two other priests to all of his fights and pay their way to the fights if they wanted to come there. So, like on my website, sonnyliston.com, there's the main photo. The photo I use on my homepage has three priests surrounding Sonny was Sonny sitting down, which is after he won the title from Floyd Patterson. And so Sonny was, there's a side to Sonny Liston that people don't know about. And in my book, the photos that I use, none of them are fighting poses. All of them depict him as a human being. And as it turns out, those were cheaper to license from the Denver Post and the Chicago History Museum than the fighting poses, which cost a lot more money. But those are all out there. I didn't care to put that out there. I wanted to show people a different side of Sonny Liston that nobody else had told them about.
Okay. Let me ask a question. So you touched on it as well. So tell the fans about Sonny as a young boy, and how comes he got into the jail? And I think you touched on it about the police. They kept them bothered. They kept harassing him. Can you touch on that? On the young Sonny and the harass, and also the age. I was very with the age thing. But go ahead.
Well, like I say, if that in fact is a photo of Sonny Liston in the 1934 East St. Louis Journal, it means he had to be born no later than 1919. The Encyclopedia Britannica lists his year of birth as 1917. The Liston family crest lists Sonny's year of birth as 1919. Some of the FBI files list his year of birth as 1927. Geraldine Liston, his wife, was born in 1925. When Sonny was arrested for participation in 3 armed robberies in Missouri, the police report listed his year of birth as 1928. I mean, it's all over the place. But a lot of doctors who examined Sonny after each one of the Ali fights, one doctor said he's at least 45 no matter what he says. After the first the fight in Miami, when Sonny lost the title, all of the 8 examining physicians said his age was somewhere between 38 and 41. Sonny usually gave his year of birth as 1932. For that fight, he said he actually was he listed his year of birth as 1934. So on the tail of the tape, a lot of times you'll see that Sonny said he was 29 when Ali was 22, which is absolutely ludicrous. But Sonny was arrested for armed robberies. They just terrible judgment. They made like $14. He and 2 other guys on 3 armed robberies. And Sonny used to always wear this black and yellow checkered shirt. So the police knew him as the Yellow Shirt Bandit. And he got picked up. And he served, I think, pretty close to 3 years in Jefferson City Prison. The St. Louis Police Department harassed him unmercifully. They arrested him at least 19 times, I think. And after Sonny got out of jail the second time, supposedly for assaulting a police officer, which if it was a really good case, he would have served a lot more than 9 months in jail. But they told him, and the police chief told him, look, if you don't leave town, they're going to find you in an alley someday. So that's when Sonny got moved. He moved to Chicago and fought, and then the East Coast mob took control of his contract. They never fixed any of Sonny's fights, but that's when Frank Blinky Palermo and Frankie Carbo really took control of Sonny's career. And when Sonny moved to Philadelphia, he was harassed constantly. When he moved to Denver, which is a place that he loved, his sparring partner, Ray Schoninger, said the same 2 cops stopped them when they were driving to do their road work or to the gym 100 times, 25 days in a row. They stopped them, and they were always watching Sonny. In fact, they used to position a plainclothes car outside of his house in Denver, because I heard this on an audio tape when Geraldine Liston was talking. She said one day she had to go to the drugstore, and her car, her pink Cadillac, was in the garage. So she took Sonny's Cadillac, which was in the driveway, and she's driving to the drugstore, and the cops are following her. She gets out of the car, and all of a sudden they turn away. And she knew she was being followed, but they didn't know they were following her. They thought they were following Sonny. So it was just, Sonny was ahead of his time. This is not a defense of anything that Sonny Liston did, but a lot of the athletes today, black and white, have done a lot worse things than Sonny Liston probably ever did, and did them more often. which is no defense. And Sonny would say, "Stop defending me. You don't need to be defending me now." But what all I know about Sonny Liston, and the thing that I'm trying to rectify, is what took place in this lifetime, not what's taken place in any other lifetime or in the spirit world. So, and it's a passion of mine. I could wake up in 30 seconds. I could give an interview about Sonny Liston because I know and I learn something every day almost. I've learned so much about Sonny since I wrote that book.
Okay. Let me. Why did he get into the crime? What kind of childhood was he? Well, you said he's he's learning. Was he truant in school? I mean,
he didn't. He used to say he went to school in like maybe to the 3rd or 4th grade, and he was so much bigger than the other kids, and they made fun of him and he beat him up. But he made up that story. I don't think he spent a day in school because his father had them working, all the kids working. Like Sonny said, as soon as you were old enough to work, he put you to work. And that was about age 8 for Sonny. And his father was a real SOB. And Sonny said that. And what I find really remarkable is that a lot of times, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, meaning that you learn behavior from your parents. And if you're a man, you learn behavior from your father. And his father was abusive to everyone, including his kids and other people's kids. Sonny loved children as much as anybody. And he would hang out a lot of the time with white children. There were a number of white kids. He wanted to adopt Peter Keenan Jr., whose father was, I think, a featherweight champion in Great Britain. And when he went over there in 1963 on a barnstorming tour, he became very close with this kid, Pete Keenan. And he invited Pete to Denver for the Christmas holidays. And when he got there, Sonny wrote a letter, Sonny and Geraldine, they wrote a letter to the Keenans saying they wanted to adopt him. Which is, it's almost precocious. It's like, who would do this? It's the innocence in there, and 3 days later, Peter Keenan Sr. came to Denver and took Pete home with him. But Sonny, he would have adopted him. Sonny adopted, other children.
He did. He adopted. Did he have any children of his own, or he just adopted?
He adopted the kids basically who were his own, if not formally. Any kid that he knew about, he evidently took really good care of. William Wingate says Bill Wingate in Philadelphia, he never knew that Sonny was his father, but when he'd come there, his mother Dolores would say, "No, it's okay. Go with Sonny." And he said, "I never wanted for anything. I had the best toys. I had the best clothes. We were great buddies." And it wasn't until much later, and after Sonny died, that he found out that he was his father. And that's probably the way Sonny wanted it too, because after Lewiston, he knew that any of his children could be at risk for any reason, whether it be from, and I don't think at that point he felt any threat from Nation of Islam members. But the mob, you never know what the mob would do back then.
Okay. Beats.
Yeah, so in the film with Ving Rhames, where he portrays Sonny sleeps with one of the mob guys' girlfriends or wives, and the guy really admired him, and that basically sentenced Liston to death after that. Is there any truth in that? You think Sonny really did that?
Well, Sonny had a lot of girlfriends, and Mel Greb told me that there was a tall, blonde, junkie hooker that was Sonny's downfall. Would Sonny have been killed for some reason like that? I mean, that movie to me had no credibility whatsoever. The only good thing about it is that it depicted a side of Sonny, like it was in part a love story, which was probably totally made up. I don't know, because nobody talks about that. Ash Resnick once told me, there's a lot I could tell you, because I talked to Ash on a couple of occasions. He says, after Geraldine's gone, I would tell you. And Ash died in 1988, I believe, and Geraldine died in 2005, so Ash never told me those stories. But that movie was so terrible. After Sonny lost the title, they said he fought in Chicago and St. Louis. It wasn't even factually correct. Sonny couldn't fight anywhere in the country for 3 years. Uh, so, and it was the same tired old narrative, and it was the whole thing was based on the mob, and there's a reason that movie did not get distributed at all, because it just wasn't any good. It was a low budget movie, and as far as was there a woman like that in Sonny's life? Yeah. Was that why Sonny died? I have no way of knowing that. But if my advice to you is forget that movie. If you think you learned anything about Sonny other than that he loved women, and he did love women, I'll tell you that. And he has talked to Josie about that. He did love women, and that relationships were almost always very complicated. But other than that, I wouldn't put my name on that movie. Not at all. I wouldn't. Oh my God, no.
Okay. All right, but that's
sorry.
Go ahead.
The only guy to defeat him before Ali, Marty Marshall, he seemed a bit useful because he beat Bob Satsfield. Even though Bob Satsfield was best at light heavyweight, he was a good fighter, and he seemed like a decent fighter. What do you know about Marty Marshall?
Marty Marshall was a very unorthodox fighter. He was a boxer. He was tall, and he could give you a lot of trouble. He was not a great fighter, but when they first fought, what was that, in 1954, I think, Sonny was still learning how to box. And Sonny would have won that first fight, but his jaw got broken. And to his credit, he fought the rest of the fight in severe pain. He walked the streets that night in pain because it didn't. The ringside physician there said you got to go to the hospital, and Sonny didn't go to the hospital, but he was given some pills, and it wasn't until he got back to St. Louis that he got his jaw set. And then he fought Marshall a couple other times. It may have been that Marshall knocked Sonny down, because there is a newspaper clipping which says that Sonny went down and got up immediately. One of his cornermen said he was off balance and he went down. When Sonny was asked about it before the Patterson fight, he says, well, if that's what Marty says, let's just leave it at that. Did he get knocked down? Or was it a slip? I don't know. It didn't hurt Sonny. Okay. And Marty paid for that in the subsequent two fights. He said a couple of punches that he took to his stomach and to one of his ears, the hurt from those punches stayed with him for the rest of his life. So, and that's the thing. If the only way you were going to beat Sonny Liston is if you outboxed him. But by the time Sonny in 1960, the kind of shape he was in, if you were going to beat him, even if you were a great boxer, and if, let's say, it was a 15-round fight, you were going to have to do that for 15 rounds. And I'm telling you, I don't care who you were not going to last 15 rounds with Sonny Liston. Because at some point, Sonny's going to land a telling blow. And he didn't need to land a telling blow. Because he, like Joe Louis said, Sonny, whenever and wherever Sonny Liston hit you, he hurt you. So Marshall gave Sonny a little trouble. Burt Whitehurst, who was a very, very good boxer, gave Sonny trouble. Eddie Machen had an injured right shoulder, so he knew he couldn't beat Sonny, and he didn't come to fight. And he infuriated Sonny. He made him mad. And if you look at that fight, you'll see Sonny fights. He's running after him. He wants to kill him.
I saw that fight.
He kissed him on the neck. Sonny, that was not a good thing to do. But I have a lot of respect for Eddie Machen. He got cold-cocked against Ingemar Johansson. He was a far better fighter than Ingemar Johansson was. And he had a troubled life also. But Eddie Machen was a master boxer. He was a great boxer. Eddie Machen at his best would have given Joe Louis all the trouble. That would have been a 7-5 fight, I think, at his best. I'd make Joe the favorite, but they were pretty close in size. And he could hit hard too, but the name of the game is boxing. So,
okay, go ahead, Beats.
So, they said that Liston was kept away from the title before he fought Patterson. Where do you think his peak was? Where was his peak?
1960.
1960. Okay.
Yeah. 59 and 60, he really, in 58, he served notice on the division when in 69 seconds he stopped Wayne Bethea in the first round. And Bethea was the number 10 rated contender, and he had never been knocked down. And Sonny destroyed his mouth. I mean, Bethea lost most of his teeth, basically, with one or two left hooks. In 59, he beat Cleveland Williams. He beat Mike DeJohn. He beat some really good fighters. And then in 1960, he beat. Remember, Roy Harris won 12 rounds with Floyd Patterson. Roy Harris, he was a decent fighter. He went 2 minutes and 35 seconds in the first round against Sonny. He knocked out Cleveland Williams for a second time in 2 rounds. He knocked out Zora Foley, who had been the number 1 contender in 28 seconds into the 3rd round. And then he had the Machen fight, and he also fought one other fight with Howard King. So at that point, there was nobody else left to fight. The only fighters that were left were not really legitimate contenders. I mean, he could have taken Johansson and Henry Cooper and Brian London. You could have put those 3 guys in the same ring with Sonny. I truly believe this. And not one of those 3 guys would be standing at the end of 3 minutes. Because they were undersized, they couldn't take a punch, and Sonny was affectionately, and it's there are a lot of things people say about Sonny, depending on who says it. Like Angelo Dundee called him the Monster Man, which was a compliment. To say Sonny was a killer is a compliment in the context of the ring. When Dick Schaap, in a retrospective, and Dick Schaap was a great journalist, when I think it was a NBC documentary of the first Ali-Liston fight, I believe, he said. He actually said that Sonny Liston was a hitman for the mob. Now, if I'm missing something here, does not a hitman for the mob mean that you kill people at the behest of the mob? Sonny did not do that. And for Dick Schaap to say that, and for that to make it through the final cut, it's like, oh, well, Sonny Liston, excuse me, he was a piece of shit. And so, yeah, we can say anything we want. And as you know, legally, it's not a crime to slander a dead person. Okay, so, and that's what you've been seeing for the last 43 years. It's gotten worse and worse and worse, and I've had it. I'm fed up with it.
Wow.
Beach, did you read my book?
I haven't.
We're definitely gonna, especially the people listening now, they're gonna definitely go and write the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's on. There's a digital version on Kindle, or I have hardcovers, which are very costly to send to Great Britain. Amazon has this Create Space where they produce paperbacks on demand, which is really a cool service.
I will definitely purchase it. I'm going to definitely purchase it.
I think I saw audio. I've clicked it before I interview. I think there's an audio version. I was clicking. I think I can. So I can.
Oh no, I'm going to do that. But
you're going to do that? Okay, there isn't.
Yeah, I'll take out. I've gone through a book and I'm taking out some of the stuff that just would not be. Some things just wouldn't lend itself to audio, but a lot. That's how a lot of people read right now. So
I want to read the actual words. Can I just ask you about Cus D'Amato? Because he was really pivotal. It was Floyd Patterson who had the decency to say this man deserves a shot. Floyd Patterson said, I could be in the same predicament that Sonny is in his early years.
Well, you're being a little overly kind towards Floyd.
Okay.
Because at the end, in 1960, Sonny when he destroyed the division, he had fought all of the fighters that D'Amato would not let Patterson fight, and frankly, that Patterson did not want to fight. Apart from Floyd's first title defense, which was against Tommy Hurricane Jackson, he never fought a black fighter until he fought Sonny. He even fought Pete Rademacher, the Olympic heavyweight champion in 1956. in Rademacher's first professional fight. No, Floyd does not deserve any kudos. Floyd had to fight Sonny because nobody wanted to see his fights otherwise. When he fought Tom McNeely in December of 1961, it was a joke. Tom McNeely wasn't even rated. And he knocked him down like 11 times. He actually helped them up several of those times. So no, Floyd's earning potential was nil. And not only that, Floyd insisted Sonny only get 12.5% of the gross, when all of his other opponents got 20%.
Okay.
And that was criminal. And then not only that, there was a rematch clause that it would have cost Sonny $1 million to get out of. And even in that, when Sonny was champ, the contract for the rematch had been written that Patterson got more from the closed circuit revenues than Sonny did. So D'Amato knew all along that his fighter couldn't beat Sonny. There's no question about that. And I believe that Floyd knew all along. Now, Floyd was a game fighter. I think Floyd was a great may have been the best 185-pound fighter of all time. I think he would have beat the crap out of Rocky Marciano if they had fought in 1955. Of course, Floyd was a young guy back then, and Rocky was, at the end of his career. But Floyd, even when he bulked up, he fought, and he had some credible showings against the heavyweights, even at a later age, of the heavyweights of the day. So Floyd was a great light heavyweight. He's a great 185-pound fighter, and that was strictly about the money, and he made a fortune. He made $1.16 million fighting Sonny.
Yes,
and because of the way he tried to get paid, the IRS swooped in and said, "You can't do that." They held Sonny's money. They wanted. Then D'Amato and Patterson wanted to put Sonny's entire person to escrow until the rematch was fought. Cuss D'Amato for, he was a great trainer, let's say, and he protected his fighters, and he did a good job with Mike Tyson, obviously, and a lot of other people, but he criticized Sonny for, being mob controlled, and that's why he could. Patterson was the only guy that Carbo and Palermo didn't have a piece of or didn't have any say over. But what you'll read in my book is D'Amato's behavior towards boxing and being a monopoly was the very same thing as the people that he criticized. He wanted to control boxing. He wanted to control the heavyweight division. So, and the good thing about Sonny, he said he never hated Floyd. But he said, I think he could have certainly given me a larger portion of the gate. And Sonny was #1 contender for 2.5 stinking years. That never happens. That could never happen. It only happened because there was a different set of rules when it came to Sonny Liston. But after that fight, because Patterson came in there to fight, Sonny went over to him after the fight and thanked him for giving him the title shot. Sonny was a very decent guy. He had his flaws. He had his problems. And he drank a lot. And if Sonny Liston drinking, you wouldn't want to have been around the guy. And that got him into a lot of trouble. But at his, Sonny, the three of us, if we knew Sonny, we would have liked Sonny. We would have been proud to call him our friends.
Yeah,
I truly believe that.
I know that. Sorry, Errol, yeah? Gene Tunney technically wasn't the first $1 million purse. I think he was a few dollars short. He wrote a check to Tex Rickard for $10,000, and Tex, in return, gave him a check for $1 million. So it made Tunney look like he had $1 million in one check. But Patterson was the first guy to make $1 million purse against Liston. Is that correct?
I believe so.
And Sonny made $1 million after in the rematch, didn't he?
Oh no! Oh, that was Sonny made like. I think about $255,000 because people stayed away. The first fight grossed about 4.7 or 4.8 million, but the second fight grossed a lot less because the only reason the fight took place is that Floyd had something to prove to himself. Plus, he knew that was going to be his last really good payday. So, oh no, Sonny. I took a look at Sonny's tax returns in the '80s at the California State Athletic Commission, and the first year he made any kind of money was in 1961 when he got 75 grand to fight Albert Westfall, which was a part of the closed circuit doubleheader when Patterson fought Tom McNeely. He made like 280 grand gross for the first Patterson fight, and then less than that for the second one, even though he got a higher share. So no, Sonny didn't. Based on the amount of money that some of these heavyweights fought now. I mean, Sonny should be if he was fighting now, he'd be a billionaire. Mm. He would have held the title for a long, long time.
Yeah. Wow. Boy, man. No, Beats, go ahead if you got any more questions. I'm just listening along at this point. I'm just listening during the journey. Go ahead, Beats.
Yeah. So, how much ambition did he have after the Ali fight? Because he must have been pretty old. And between that and the Leotis Martin fight, was he just fighting for money because he's fighting in Europe and he didn't seem like he could get any dates on no major cards or bills?
Well, yeah, but I don't think he ever got paid more than 20 grand. Although after he knocked out Henry Clark, he thought he might be in a position to make a little bit more money, but none of the young fighters really wanted to fight him. I saw Joe Frazier out in Las Vegas at an appearance arranged by Al Bernstein. This is before I met Al Bernstein. And I asked him if there was ever any thought of fighting Liston. He said, well, I thought of sparring with him, but I not really fighting him. But there is some evidence that maybe they were going to fight. And Joe at that point might have beat Sonny because, I mean, Sonny was close to 50 years old at that point. But the thing about Sonny fighting, that's the only thing he knew how to do to make money. He wouldn't have been a commentator. Well, nobody liked him. Nobody wanted anything to do with him, which is why he started... if he could guest referee, he would have, he probably made some money doing that. But that's why he got into some, nefarious kind of things. That's what probably drove him into the drug trade, which one way or another is what killed him. Whether it was an overdose, or whether he was murdered, or maybe it was just a heart attack. But maybe it was a heart attack. And, when somebody's in good shape, you see this with some football players. Who was it? Don Rogers, I think, who the night before he got married, the guy was in great shape and he snorted a lot of cocaine and he went into cardiac arrest and he died. And from what I read, the better shape your body is in, if you abuse it with drugs, it will have a worse effect on you. I don't know how that works. No, I mean, at that point, Sonny's money-making ability was nil, which is why, to me, it's just ludicrous to think that the mob would have any interest in a guy who couldn't, who's making 20 grand a fight. And Sonny would not throw a fight for anybody. He would not. He was too proud a man to do that.
Okay. So, after he beat Floyd Patterson, did you ever see Floyd in the disguises? He was wearing disguises because he was so ashamed of the
yeah. And he knew he was going to lose. Harold Conrad says somebody told him before the fight that he has to be hooked up with a makeup guy to fit him for a phony beard. And so Harold Conrad, the publicist, he swore the guy to secrecy. So Patterson had two cars parked outside of Comiskey Park. One is if he won, and then he had a Lincoln Continental with the disguise and luggage in it, which he was going to put on and drive to New York. Why would you put on a disguise? Get in your car and go. I mean, he was a very insecure guy. And like I said, I mean, he was a really good fighter, Floyd Patterson. He was a talented guy. He was a talented amateur. But, yeah, it was... I got to tell you, one of my cousins, Josh Sorkin, he works for a mediation firm where retired judges are hired to help mediate disputes so that they don't have to go to trial. And there's a retired judge by the name of Joseph Casciotto in Chicago, and his father, Dr. Nicholas Casciotto, was one of the ringside physicians for the first Patterson-Liston fight. and Joe was about my age, so he went with his father into the dressing rooms of Patterson and Liston. And so they go into Patterson's dressing room, and Floyd is basically comatose. He says, the doctor says, "Hello, Floyd, you need to take your vital signs." He is frozen with fear. Dr. Casciato says, "Cuss, can you come over here? I have to write something down. I have to take his blood pressure and his heart rate. I have to take his pulse." He had to get him to unbend his arm. So he was gripped with fear.
Wow.
Meanwhile, so then he goes, Dr. Casciato and his son, Joe, they go into Liston's dressing room, and Night Train is blaring. It's a festive occasion. And Sonny's sitting there, and he introduced himself. "Charles, how are you?" "Yeah, fine." Takes his vitals. His son looks at his wrapped hands and never forgot his hands, because Sonny had these 15.5-inch fists.
Wow.
And when they were wrapped, I remember what his son told me, Joe. He said, when I looked at his fist, it occurred to me, and he was probably 14 or 15 at the time, that if Sonny hit me in the face, he would hit my entire face. With his fist.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the doctor was a betting man. And at the time, you could place bets right in the arena. So he just, Sonny knew what he meant. He said, "So, Charles, what do you think about the fight?" And so Sonny looks at him. He says, "Doc, no 185-pound mother bleep can beat me." "Okay, thank you, Charles." Runs out, places $1,000 bet. I think the odds were like 7.5 to 5. Why people thought Patterson would only be a 7.5 to 5 point underdog, a 7.5 to 5 underdog, I don't know. But the fact remains that Sonny Liston was the favorite from the time he fought Johnny Summerlin the first time in 1954. Sonny was favored in every one of his fights, including both Ali fights, even in the rematch, even in the Lewiston fight. And I'll tell you something else. Not one of Sonny's opponents ever scheduled a victory party.
After they thought they're gonna lose.
Yeah, it's Ali's Louisville sponsoring group, the Syndicate. They said, "Well, victory party? We didn't have any. We didn't plan no victory party. We're lucky. We're happy he's alive, much less won."
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go on, Beat.
Because even though Sonny was really intimidating to his opponents. How did Ali get in his head like that? Ali did get in his head a little, didn't he?
Well, yeah. Well, he decided early on that he needed to win that fight as much outside of the ring as he did in it. He needed to level the playing field. So, and the two ways he did it, he managed to convince everybody that he really, he wasn't that good of a fighter. And based on his prior fights, I mean, he never really fought a top flight contender. Doug Jones was a very, very solid fighter, by the way. He was a good fighter. But Doug Jones never considered himself a threat to beat Sonny Liston. He said that. And the thing that one of the things I write in my book that nobody's ever talked about is that Muhammad Ali only fought as hard as he had to. Most fighters, they go in there and they're all focused. They give it everything they can. Ali he enjoyed being in there. He would play mind games on guys. He only fought as hard as he had to, and he never fought. The only guy he ever fought, like he did the first Liston fight, was Sonny. He didn't fight Joe Frazier that way, where he kept moving, because he knew, I can't let this guy hit me, and he said that. Yeah. He said that in preparation for the rematch. I know not for a second can I present a stationary target, and he never fought. And George Foreman, he let flail away at him, and he got George Foreman's head too. But the key is he got Sonny to not fight his fight. So it's one thing that Sonny trained for a 2 or 3 round fight. He weighed 218. He probably went into the ring at 225. And Sonny's best weight was probably 211 or 212. There's actually 3 consecutive fights where he weighed 212 and a half. I mean, he could, his training regimen, he was so in tune with his body. For 3 years, he was somewhere between 209 and 212 and a half. There were like 16 fights. He was always within that. But when he went to Sonny's house, both in Denver and in Miami Beach, in integrated neighborhoods, and embarrassed the hell out of Sonny, Sonny just said, this kid's gone too far. I'm going to kill him. I want to kill him. And so Sonny went in there and fought angry. And I remember Ali saying, I don't have to worry about Sonny Liston. He has no balance. And based on the first fight, yes, he didn't have any balance because he was running. That was not Sonny's fight. So he got Sonny to fight. Ali got Sonny to fight Ali's fight.
Yeah. Because I remember when Ali was trying to say, Sonny Liston is flat-footed, Joe Louis is flat-footed, he's too sweet, I'm too sweet, like Sugar Ray. And what was the whole thing with Sugar Ray Robinson and Ali and Joe Louis and Sonny Liston? He's trying to say that they're just flat-footed and they couldn't do nothing to him.
Well, yeah, I mean, Sonny, yeah. Sonny always said it doesn't matter how fast you are. It matters how fast your hands are. And and he said, I'm like Joe. When I throw punches, they're plenty fast. But he had an 84-inch reach. So he didn't have to chase Cassius Clay. Clay had to come to him. He had a 79-inch reach. He had to take the title. Sonny could jab, could land his jab a lot easier than Clay could land his jab on Sonny because of that reach differential. Wow. So, that's how Ali, he did that to Ernie Terrell, and he tried to get Frazier off this game, although Joe fought his own fight. Joe is not the fighter Ali was. And in fact, when I talked to Eddie Futch, he just out of the blue, we were talking about the heavyweights, and that was a great interview. I mean, I love talking to Eddie Futch. He was a great trainer. He said Joe's problem, and I didn't even ask him this, he said Joe's problem is that he was too little. He was little. And it's because he had like a 74-inch reach. He was 5'11 and a half. A guy with a jab could do to him what Buster Douglas did to Mike Tyson with a 72-inch reach. Now, Mike Tyson was a great fighter, and he and Frazier would have been a great fight. I happen to think in their primes, I probably would go with Tyson. That's how he got in his head. And the real tragedy in Sonny Liston's boxing career is that he was ready for the rematch when it was scheduled for November 16th in Boston in 1964. And then on Friday, November the 13th, Ali suffers the hernia. And everybody who saw Sonny thought he was going to, there was no doubt in their mind he was going to win that fight. And everybody, and people surrounding Ali were very, very worried. And the thing is, he was old. He couldn't get back into shape. And Ali was just entering his prime. So I wouldn't be on right now. We wouldn't be talking about this, I truly believe, if that November 16th fight had taken place. And it may very well have been Muhammad Ali's last fight. Because because somebody asked Sonny before, in the build-up to that, the postponed rematch, he said, so... Sonny, are you bitter about everything that's happened, and the way Ali has treated you and this and that? And he said, and Sonny was a man of few words, and he says, when I catch him, you'll know I'm bitter. And because Ali was young enough to absorb a lot of punishment, and fighters, it's instinctively when they're hurt, they try and get up. They're not thinking, oh, I'm a dead man if I get up. They don't think that way. They're just, they're out on their feet. Joe Louis, from that first punch that Max Schmeling hit him with, that first right hand, which Sonny actually refers to in some of my notes here, that he's told Josie Rose, he remembered nothing after that. When Cassius Clay fought Sonny Banks and got knocked down, he remembered nothing after that, even though he knocked Sonny Banks out. So, yeah, it causes him to get up. He would have been killed. He may have been killed. He may have been debilitated to a point where, in any case, he would not have functioned very well for the rest of his life.
Okay. Ooh. Sonny hit that hard.
Yeah.
he oh, my God. What he did to... Wait till you read what I say in the book about what he did. Yeah, and what he did to punching bags. He'd knock them off the hooks. And the thing is, Sonny, he never hit as hard as he could have in the ring, because he didn't have to. It was a war of attrition. He just wanted to land his punches. Because even if they were delivered at 75 or 80%, it's going to hurt the guy.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, what about the liniment on the gloves? There's an accusation in the Cleveland Williams fights and in the Ali fight. What about that? Can you substantiate anything on that?
I would say that it's totally false. Cleveland Williams never said that. There's a picture of Cleveland Williams shaking his head in the corner, but he's trying to knock the cobwebs out. Cleveland Williams, and I think either Eddie Matron or I forget who it was, Eddie Matron or Zora Foley, there's been written that the gloves were doctored. Sonny didn't doctor his gloves. He didn't have to doctor his gloves. He didn't doctor his gloves in the clay fight. Barney Felix said he went over and smelled his gloves, and when Angelo Dundee talked to him and said there's something on his gloves, he says there's nothing on his gloves. What happened is, the compound that they used to stem the flow of the blood from the cut that Sonny had on his cheek in the third round. You can look at the fight, and you see where Ali's forehead is planted at one point in the fourth round on Sonny's cheek, and he didn't complain until he gets back to his corner. Ali didn't complain until he got back to his corner that his eyes were burning. And if you look at the corner, what happened is Dundee would take a sponge and wipe down from the forehead the perspiration that was on his fighters' faces. And Ali used to, it's been said, had cobra vision, which means he kept his eyes open a lot of the time, even when he was being punched. So when the sponge went down, if there was anything on Ali's forehead, that's when it got into his eyes. Now, I do believe that there was something that got into Clay's eyes. He knew he was in a good position to win the fight at that point because he had felt Sonny's jabs and they had nothing behind him. You see in the fourth round, a couple of Sonny's jabs landed right on his face, and his face doesn't move. Usually when Sonny hit you with a jab, you would back up. You would be thrown back, and then you'd have to come forward. So, but there was one reference where supposedly Joe Polino doctored his gloves, and Sonny said, "Do it." This is a bunch of crap. This is in David Remnick's book, I think. And then he threw it under the bottle under the ring to avoid detection. Well, what if he had another cut? He would need that stuff. But it's one time. So somebody makes one assertion, no matter how outrageous, about Sonny Liston, and it's accepted as truth. I do so much research, I can refute it based on any point I make, whether it's the point I want to make or a point I want to refute. I'll have as much information as I possibly can, and none of which I have made up. And people don't want to believe that.
Okay.
People would rather believe that Liston was knocked down than to believe that Muslims kidnapped his wife and child and threatened to kill him if Sonny didn't lose the fight.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, people can believe what they want to believe, but I stand by everything in my book. It's as close. It's the truth, as close to the truth as I believe I could have gotten.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, what was his relationship with George Foreman? I heard he taught Foreman how to jab, and he was quite influential on George Foreman, the man and fighter.
Oh yeah. Well, Henry Winston, who was boxing's first black promoter, a wonderful guy. He was steering George Foreman after the Olympics, and he got Dick Sadler to train him, and Dick Sadler was also training Sonny, so they trained together, and they didn't talk too much. And there's a lot of people who have watched their sparring. There are some people who watched their sparring sessions who think that Sonny took it easy on George.
Oh gosh, shoot! How could it move? George was one of the hardest hitters in heavyweight history. He took it easy on him.
Well, you got to remember he's an amateur at this point.
Oh yeah, but he still could. Yeah. True.
I think I'm not positive, but I think when Sonny fought Henry Clark at the Cow Palace in 1968. And just beat the crap out of him. Foreman was on the undercard in his first professional fight. So, amateurs are not professionals. Yeah, George could hit very, very hard.
Yeah.
I think George may have been the third best heavyweight of all time, which is why I say that there's a major drop-off in the talents of Ali and Liston and everybody else. And in his prime, would Mike Tyson have had a chance against a big guy like George? Well, he would have had a chance, but 3 out of 4 times, I think George wins that fight. Would Joe Louis have a chance against George Foreman? Sure, but Joe Louis is a lot bigger than and a lot more powerful than Joe Louis. Was he technically as good a fighter? Maybe not. But, Joe could be hurt a lot. He got knocked down a lot. He got knocked down several times in the first round. Jimmy Braddock, who was a light heavyweight, knocked him down. I love Joe. I mean, what Joe did for this country by beating Max Schmeling, what he did for the world was the most important thing that any athlete, I think, has ever done for a country, and particularly this country. And the way he was treated afterwards, where when he was in the Army, and he was treated like a second-class citizen, like all blacks were. And then when he donated his purse, when he signed over his check at an exhibition to the war effort, because it wasn't written directly to the war effort, he got hounded for the rest of his life for back taxes. This is, I'll tell you something. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys this, but, blacks and black athletes have not been treated all that well in this country. And it's only now that, there's so many great athletes that they're enjoying the fruits of their labors. But, back in the 30s and 40s, if you weren't Joe Louis or Sugar Ray Robinson, if you got a fight against a top contender, a white guy, you had to agree to lose the fight. That's just the way it was.
Yeah.
Well, shit.
Now, the Leotis Martin fight, which effectively finished his career, let's be honest, that was an absolute war, and Leotis Martin was a very big puncher. Do you have any input for the people on that fight?
Sonny, Lem Banker told me Sonny took that fight on very short notice, and he was sick. He was filming Love American Style in Arizona.
Was that a film?
It was a TV series.
Okay, Sonny was in a TV series. Okay.
Yeah, he did. Once he lost, he was in a Monkees movie, and he made several appearances. He had an agent in Los Angeles that got him a lot of TV and some movie roles. They weren't big roles, but it helped him pay the bills. So Sonny started bleeding from his nose, and he wasn't in the greatest shape, and he knocked Leotis Martin down. Leotis Martin started out as a middleweight, but he was a tough fighter. He was 190 some pounds. He was a good fighter. Was he championship material? Well, in the early 50s he would have been probably, but not at this time. And Sonny was having such a tough time breathing through his nose that he spit out his mouthpiece prior to, I believe, the 9th round, which was the last round. And Leotis Martin, he caught him. He stood him up. What was it? Was it a right hand that stopped Sonny in his tracks and basically rendered him unconscious? And then a left hook and a right hand put Sonny down. And you knew Sonny wasn't getting up. He was unconscious before he hit the canvas. He was also probably 50 years old. So that was the only true knockdown that Sonny Liston, or knockout, that Sonny Liston ever that Sonny ever suffered. And it was, I remember watching the fight. I was at a friend of mine's because I was touting Sonny even way back then. And I remember the TV coverage. It's the only time that Howard Cosell shut his damn mouth. Wow. Because he knew what he had just seen. And Sonny knew it was over at that point. You don't come back from that. And George Foreman talks about that the gathering, which was supposed to be a celebration at Sonny's house, it was like a wake after that fight. And Davey Pearl said Sonny was the best loser he ever saw. He didn't make excuses. Like Evander Holyfield evidently never lost a fight. But when you hear him talk, he should have won every fight he was in. So, Sonny, he accepted it. He had to accept it. He was knocked unconscious. He was winning the fight, but he was ponderous. It's hard to get in shape when you're 50 years old. You should not be fighting. And on that line, I will tell you that George Foreman, when he beat Michael Moore, George was ponderous at that point.
Yeah.
I would bet you all the money in the world, all the money that I had. I can't bet all other people's money. I would bet you everything that I have that the George Foreman who knocked out Michael Moore in 1994 would never get into the ring with the George Foreman who knocked out Joe Frazier in 1973. Those are two different fighters. I'm happy for George because now he's, close to a billionaire based on his comeback. But you lose something. Your prime. Ash Resnick used to tell me, he says, your prime is like 23 to 26, maybe 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. Your boxers are way past their prime. And the fact that Sonny was much older, that shows you what a formidable fighter he was. Because if, in fact, he won the title in his early 40s, this is unprecedented. Unprecedented.
Yeah. The Leotis Martin fight was brutal because it finished Leotis Martin's career. He had a detached retina, apparently.
I think he had two detached retinas. Yeah, wow. which is very, very unfortunate.
From Sonny hitting him.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, he took a lot of punishment. I mean, Sonny still hit, and detached retinas are not all that uncommon. So, but you got to quit because otherwise you'll go blind. So, yeah, he was in line to make a lot of money. Sonny is not the only fighter that has ever screwed over who suffered bad luck. Leotis Martin suffered bad luck, and I doubt that the rest of his life was any better than Sonny's was, or Cleveland Williams was, or any other of these poor, unfortunate fighters.
Okay.
Wow. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Whoa. Go on, Beats.
Yeah, like you say, he did have some commercial endorsements, and some people were attracted to him, in that line of entertainment. Andy Warhol, he done an advert with him. I've always seen them together. What was their relationship, and what was their business relationship, more important?
I probably only met that one time on this Braniff ad, where Sonny didn't say anything. Andy Warhol's talking to him, and it was a clever ad. They're sitting on an airplane. What appears to be an airplane, and the loquacious Sonny Liston or something, the voiceover says. So Sonny didn't have to do anything. All he had to do was be himself. All he had to do was put what Reuben Hurricane Carter called a Sonny Liston smile on his face. And he did that commercial, and he was in a movie about bikers with... was it Charles Napier or something? And Sonny got money wherever he could. He was Red Fox's bodyguard. He would sell cocaine evidently to people. He was just trying to keep his head above water, and I guarantee you he was bitter. But he just lost himself in drink and women.
Okay.
And if you're looking for a new profession, dealing with, the Mexican drug cartel would probably not be a good career move for anybody who wanted to stay alive. And the sheriff's department and the police department knew he was dealing drugs, knew he was involved, and so it's just unfortunate. But the narrative of people and the public perception of people, and particularly athletes, always improves over time. And Sonny's has only gotten worse. And this thing about the FBI memo, it just shows you. There's still, the end of that article in the Washington Times, the guy sarcastically referenced Sonny's headstone. At the end of in the last line, he says, well, this is on Sonny Liston. He says, who was a man. It was like sarcastic. It was like he was making fun of Sonny. I left a message with this guy. He didn't call me back.
Okay.
Oh, he does the Sports Fix ESPN radio show. He wouldn't dare have me on. I would humiliate the man.
Okay.
I don't think he ever watched the fight.
I have a name that's going to get you really animated. You're going to enjoy this one. A.S. Doc Young.
Oh, I love Doc Young.
But it says his
Doc
book
Young.
was really dismissive. It says his book was really dismissive and
No, oh,
contemptuous.
well, I should have qualified that. I should have said, because I do believe this, and you'll see it in my book, that apart from Doc Young's biography, all of the other books that have been written since then. No, Doc Young was a very good writer, and that was a good book. You know, The Champ Nobody Wanted. He had it pegged. Exactly. Did that book sell? I don't think so, because it's very rare. It's very hard to find. You know, you could pay more for a good condition The Champ Nobody Wanted than a first edition Hemingway or a first edition Steinbeck. It's nuts. Oh no, Doc Young did a good job, and I learned a lot about Sonny from his book. So I know that was my mistake, and from now on I will make sure that when I talk about the biographies, to preface it by saying apart from Doc Young's biography. So I'm sorry I gave you that impression, but
Okay.
no, I have a lot of respect for Doc Young.
No problem at all. No problem at all.
Okay. Oh wow. Beach, any other questions, boy? Because this is
I'm absorbed
I'm
now.
actually just sitting here. Like, I'm getting more of this than I did with Alan Bernstein. In fact, this is you know. I mean, I'm sure Beach, you got any more questions for Paul?
I'm fully absorbed, and your information has been so
maybe his
valuable.
reception's gone actually.
Okay.
I'm not too. No, I don't know what's going on there.
Wow. I'm just saying, your information has been priceless. It's one of the greatest experiences actually listening to you. Even the esoteric way you're going to publish your book, that was very interesting as well. It was very enlightening, very enlightening.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I sat back and like, because it was actually more than I expected. I mean, you're thorough, completely thorough, and you do trust to do Sonny Liston justice. I mean, a lot of, we regularly have heavyweight debates, and we talk about Sonny Liston and thing. So let me just clarify: if Sonny Liston was to fight Rocky Marciano at their prime, who would have won? Because obviously,
The fight wouldn't have lasted a minute.
Explain why.
Rocky Marciano was 185 pounds. He was 5'11". His reach was 67 inches.
Oh, no.
The only way Rocky Marciano could fight was to come at you. And Sonny used to say, that's what I love, when people come at me. I don't need to go find them. Joe Louis used to say, even when Joe Louis fought Marciano in his last fight, and Joe looked like he was 50 years old, he said, I could close my eyes and jab Marciano because I knew he'd always be in front of me. Rocky Marciano did not hit like a heavyweight. He would hurt you because he threw these short punches, because he had these short arms, but it would have been a mismatch. You could have put Dempsey and Sonny and Marciano in the ring with Sonny, and they're both, Dempsey could hit pretty hard. He had a 76-inch reach, but he didn't know how to box the way these new box, the way everybody since Lewis knows how to box.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's a 30. I would bet. I mean, I like to say that Rocky Marciano could have hid behind Sonny Liston, but he couldn't have beaten him. No, there's no way. There is absolutely no way. I don't know that he would ever fought him if he was given the opportunity. I mean, Tyson would have done the same thing to Rocky Marciano. Ali would have done the same thing to Rocky. Lennox Lewis. I think Buster Douglas. Rocky Marciano was a great guy. Everybody who knew him liked him. So I don't mean to impugn upon that, but he just was not a legitimate heavyweight. So I would bet everything I have. And if I was in Sonny's corner, and Sonny was at 90% of his best, and Rocky Marciano was at his very best, and I would tell Sonny, I bet everything that I have that you would knock him out in the first round.
Wow.
Sonny would knock him out in the first round. Okay. If I said, Sonny, I bet everything I have that this fight wouldn't last a minute, the fight wouldn't have lasted a minute. Sonny wouldn't have taken any chances, but he wouldn't have had to. He would have stuck the jab out, and Marciano would have gone backwards. He would have come back in, boom, 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 boom. Would he have gotten up for the first time? Maybe. Would he have gotten up the second time? Maybe. It would not have been a fight. It would not have been a fight.
Wow. Well, let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. So, see, when Rocky was a champion, and Rocky was champion, do you think there's a point that I'm just putting up because Sonny's age? Do you think he could have avoided Sonny because Sonny was probably on the rise around that time? And another thing as well, also Jersey Joe Walker. All these guys are, I mean, maybe not Jersey, but Sonny Liston. Do you reckon Rocky could have? No one ever talks about it, but he could have got a title shot much earlier, couldn't he?
Well, not in 54 or 55 because
Rocky would have retired then.
Well, yeah, because Sonny, he started fighting. I think he had like 2 fights in '53, and then he had like eight or 10 fights in '54. He started fighting some decent fighters. He fought Johnny Summerlin, who was a rated contender. Sonny was a big underdog when he fought him, and he beat him twice. He beat him twice in, I think, both times in Detroit, which is where Summerlin was from. And then in '55, Sonny, well, he was out because of his broken jaw against Marty Marshall. So you couldn't really. I wouldn't have given, even in '54. I don't know that Marciano would have beaten Sonny, because I don't think he could have hurt him. He could have hurt him. Sonny Liston is the only heavyweight champion who was the toughest guy on the street, and he was the toughest guy in prison.
Wow.
And nobody wanted to mess with him because he hit so hard, and you couldn't hurt the man. I frankly don't think there's ever been a white heavyweight who has been, and who I would even maybe put in the top 20. And that's blasphemy, but I truly do believe that. So,
wow.
Okay.
The Russians,
Klitschko's.
Yeah, the Klitschko's. I mean, these guys. Yeah, I mean, they're not great fighters, and I don't know that they're that great of punchers, but they were big, and they would have had some success against some of the fighters, So, and they are white. I mean, I'm thinking about white fighters in this country or white fighters in Great Britain. So I apologize for that, because I really haven't evaluated the Klitschko's.
Okay.
I don't watch fights. I love watching fight films. And so what after Lennox Lewis, that's about where my knowledge of the heavyweights stops.
Yeah.
So I think the best place to close out, or well, at least for me, would be his last fight with Chuck Wepner, when he was cutting the guy's face to ribbons, basically. I think he needed a blood transfusion or something after.
I think he may have had one. He lost blood. He had a lot of cuts all over. He said when Sonny's jab landed, he could hear his bones breaking. He could hear, it was bone rattling.
Wow.
And Chuck Wepner thinks that Sonny was the greatest fighter of all time. And he fought a lot. He fought George. He fought Ali. And Sonny was an old man back then. And but again, if you're going to try and punch with Sonny, that's not how to beat him. And I don't know that, Chuck was, I got a lot of respect for the guy, and he was he was a decent heavyweight, but he wasn't a great puncher. I'm when I talk about punchers, you're talking about guys who can end a fight with one round or with one punch, or pretty much or effectively end the fight with one round. Guys like Sonny and Foreman and Ernie Shavers and Cleveland Williams, and there were some other guys. I mean, who was it? Bone Crusher Smith. He hit pretty hard, but Wepner wasn't a puncher. Rocky Marciano wasn't a puncher. Ezra Charles stood toe-to-toe with him for 15 rounds in their first fight and never was in any danger of going down. And Ezra Charles already had like 80-some fights. Ezra Charles was a great fighter.
Yeah.
But he was a 185-pound fighter. He was a blown-up light heavyweight. But, back then, you got to remember, 176 pounds, you're a heavyweight. And then they raised it to 190. The cruiserweight was up until 190. Now cruiserweight is up to 200. So how would Joe Louis have fared against Lennox Lewis and a lot of other guys? I don't know. I love Joe, but look, let's just apply the same set of rules to everybody that is applied to Sonny Liston. Or let's apply the same set of rules to Sonny Liston that's applied, to everybody else. It's just everybody needs to be treated the same way in life. There are rules. When people stop playing by the rules, that's when all hell breaks loose. So people are going to believe what they're going to believe. But if on a factual basis, if people want to tell me something about Sonny Liston and I can refute it, I have research behind me rather than prejudice or just an uninformed opinion. And I'm proud of that. And I know I'm going to be in Great Britain at some point, and I look forward to meeting both you guys. I've been in London a couple of times, but not since 2000. Actually, 2001. I went in December after 9/11, just because I figured that'd probably be a good time to fly. And because there's a lot of boxing fans, there's a lot of people who are informed about the history of the heavyweights, like you guys. And it's like any boxer or trainer that I've ever talked to. You can go up to them, and if you know something, they'll talk to you. They don't even need to know your name. They love talking about boxing with somebody who knows something about boxing. And it's like the only subject I really know. Which is, I'm telling you something about myself. I raised a lot of money for nonprofit groups, and I know how to raise money, but I know a lot more about Sonny Liston than I know about any other subject in the world.
Wow.
That's a good way. Wow, man, it's a good way of leaving. You were saying you have a website so the fans can come. Is it sonnyliston.com? Is that right?
sonnyliston.net.
sonnyliston.net. And also the book's on Amazon, right?
Yeah, you can get either the Kindle version, the digital version, or a soft cover. And I haven't uploaded the Bernstein interview yet, but I have my cousin helps me do that. And but they can go to Al's Boxing Hangouts and see that. But I've covered everything and more. This is an extensive interview, but I love talking about Sonny. Somebody was talking to me yesterday. I was saying I could wake up, it just came up yesterday. I could wake up in 30 seconds. I could talk about Sonny Liston, and I could talk about him for 5 hours. But I think we probably should save the next 3 hours for a subsequent interview, because we're probably all very hungry and thirsty.
Definitely. I hope we catch up and maybe obviously after the other books have been put out, and obviously I don't know if you've got a part 2 to go over Al Bernstein at some later date. Probably try and catch you probably after them, But it's been Paul. This has been great for the YouTube box community. Go and buy Paul's book. It's been a very interesting read, and me and Bits have been privileged to have this interview with you.
Very much so. Thank you very much.